Yep, you read that right. How did Baylor make more money than Oklahoma and Texas this year? Let's tell you when we get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day. On today's show, we're going to talk about how these SEC teams might not be going woke, but they are going broke. Let me tell you that. And how this Ashton Hawkins move is actually going to unleash a couple of guys on Baylor's offense. So start remembering these names. Plus, we will recap the Bears game against the mighty Houston Cougars last night. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Starting with our friends over at the SEC. Now, I think there's some people that think I've talked about the SEC a little bit too much on this show. I find it fun. I find it entertaining when the SEC is not doing well and the Big 12 is in a good spot. I also like dunking on the teams that left our conference and basically left it for dead. At least that's what we thought. At least that's what they thought. And now it's not looking too rosy for those two teams that left. Because it just stinks. It just broke up like a really fun conference, a really good thing. Like Baylor should be playing the Texas Longhorns and Oklahoma State should be playing Oklahoma. But they leave for what they think are greener pastures. Texas has certainly adjusted well when it comes to football, playing in the SEC championship game. But the reason why they do this is for money. It's not really about competition. It's not really about, well, we deserve to be playing amongst these teams. Don't let them fool you. That's not why. Because honestly, in the long run, I think it definitely is better, like competition-wise and fan interest-wise, all the way around, to be playing Baylor and Tech, and A&M should be in this conference too. You should be playing A&M. Don't get me wrong. Houston, TCU, Oklahoma State, like these are who these teams should be playing, and it stinks. Like, all right, you got the SEC novelty. That's great, Texas fans. OU fans. What's it going to be like when you play Kentucky in 2 years? What's it going to be like when you play Mississippi State in 2 years? The novelty's kind of gone. And all of a sudden you're going to Starkville to try and see your team play on the road. You know, it's not all that great, but that's not the point of this here. The point of this here is what the SEC is reporting in its revenue for the 2024 season or the 2024 year. This comes from the Big 12 Mafia. They retweeted this. That's actually a news outlet. It's not just all of our friends getting together and being the mafia of the Big 12, La Cosa Nostra of the truck stop conference, if you will. The official SEC account had posted that the conference made $808 million. Full members got $52 million. Texas and Oklahoma got $27.5 million. Ooh, $27.5 million. Now that seems like a pretty good figure until you realize that last year the Big 12 reported a new high where they were distributing their current members, their hateful eight, if you will, $38.9 million. So how is it that Texas and OU goes to the SEC and still doesn't get as much as Baylor and TCU do? You know, those little scrubby little schools. I know you come to a new conference, they're not going to give you the full cut, but seriously, like you would have been better off in the Big 12. And this isn't necessarily a way to dunk on Texas and OU because they'll make their money. But what it is eye-opening. First off, because the SEC is reporting about $44 million less in revenue than they did the year before. When they add these teams, they're reporting less total revenue, not breakup, not what they're distributing to their members, but a total revenue. Ooh, boy, does it hurt when you don't make the national championship game for back-to-back years. Don't have a representative there. Man, that must stink. Trust me, we get it too. But the other point of this is that it's not all that bad being in this conference. The rest of the world wants you to think that you are destitute, that you are homeless, out on the street, out on 6th Street in Austin in a tent because you play in the Big 12. And that's just not correct, okay? Because here you look at the smallest schools in this conference, Baylor, TCU. Even let's look at what they call the little brothers, right? Houston, Tech. They made more in revenue this year than you did. And yeah, it's a 1-year thing, probably a 2-year until they start to get their full share. But now your full share isn't what you thought it was going to be if they're reporting almost $45 million less than the year before. It ain't all that bad playing in the Big 12. And we've already heard Brett Yormark's projections for the next 3 years. Those numbers are only going up. Even with more teams in the conference, those numbers are going up. So maybe the grass ain't always greener. Maybe you need to get your money up, Oklahoma and Texas. And I'll respect what UT has done the last couple of years. It's hard not to. Oklahoma, meanwhile, going in the other direction. Like if you're a fan of college football right now, like a real, actual invested football fan who still knows their stuff in terms of the conference realignment and such, if I gave you who do you want to be over the next 3 years, Baylor or Oklahoma? The answer is Baylor right now. I know Oklahoma's got the brand. I know Oklahoma's got the national championships and the Heisman Trophy winners. Trust me, I'm not stupid. I'm not. Most of you think I am, but I'm slightly above stupid. But you want to talk about right now, the current state that you're in. You want to talk about how great the SEC is. You guys are going backwards. And that's like a GPA, man. It's easy to get down in the SEC. It ain't easy to get up. Baylor, on the other hand, is on the ascent in a very competitive Big 12 and in a conference that should have had 2 members in the college football playoff this year. And I'm guaranteeing you next year when it's just as competitive and there's just as good, a depth and breadth of the teams that you have in this conference, committee ain't going to make that mistake again. They're going to put a couple of teams in there. But also it is funny to kind of dunk on these teams. It is funny. But yeah, if you're looking at the short term, the 3 to 5 year window here, and I'm looking at the corner that Baylor turned this year, and I get it. Some people still don't like Dave Aranda. I know. I understand. I was calling for him to be fired. But the corner they seem to have turned this year with Dave Aranda and Jake Spavital, and where Oklahoma's at with Brent Venables losing seasons all over the place. In the SEC, the big bad SEC, I think I'd rather be Baylor in the short-term outlook than I would be Oklahoma. And what I don't like is that there are now some late openings for position coaches and offensive coordinators, hoping to keep Jake Spavital right here in Waco. We're not manifesting that. We're certainly manifesting him staying, I should say, and not jumping ship, because this offense he's got going for next year, y'all. Whoo. We're going to talk about that coming up on Locked On Baylor, how this offense is going to be even better in 2025 than it was in the back half of 2024. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, a message from our friends over at Wayfair. Look, we've already done the holiday hustle. All right. We're getting closer to spring cleaning. There's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering, refreshing my space, it helps me get into the routine I need to be in. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new start, a new look, a new year, Wayfair has everything you need all within your budget. I'm still looking for some furniture to furnish out our relatively new place here. Wayfair is the place that I'm looking, okay? The free and hassle-free delivery is the best part. Even for those larger items, they're doing that. Their site is so easy to navigate, and I found everything that I need and that I'm looking at in no time at all. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or your budget. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals. We're still going through that with endless inspiration for every space. So give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Baylor had a damn good offense in 2024, especially that back half of it, right? That 6-game win streak. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to the Baylor offense that we were expecting from Jake Spavital. It took a minute. It took a second quarterback. It took a second running back. Okay. It took some guys stepping up at the wide receiver position. It took a new tight end, but we got there. All right. And it took half the season, but we got there. And the results were excellent down the stretch. I mean, you were talking about a team that that 6-game winning streak, I mean, they were putting up 40 points a game in the Big 12. And this is not your slightly older cousin's Big 12. All right. This is not the Big 12 from 2016, 2017. It's not just a given that all these teams can just air it out and put up 40 points a game. Of course, the people at ESPN still think that's the case because they don't watch this conference, but you and I both know that's not the way this conference has been going. In fact, Matt Rule had a lot in terms of changing that. Then you started to see more defensive-minded head coaches come into this conference, and lo and behold, it's what we've got right now, a damn balanced 16 teams, a damn balanced conference. But Baylor's looking a little vintage, okay? We saw it at the beginning of kind of around this time last year. Was new coaches coming in, and Dallas Baker and Keenan Hall, they started to tweet about like, hey, remember that offense that everyone loved 10 years ago? That offense that breeded some of the best Baylor teams in the history of the program? Those teams that we all kind of wanted you to forget for a decade? That offense that was so great, that was the best in America, we're bringing that thing back. And the first couple of weeks, we're like, where is it? I'm not seeing it. I drank the Kool-Aid and I'm not seeing it. And then it came together with Sawyer Robertson and Bryson Washington and Michael Trigg and Josh Cameron and the rest. And it's going to be even better in 2025. Okay. And there's myriad reasons why it's going to be better in 2025. First of which being, of course, it's a full off season for Sawyer Robertson to be the starting quarterback, to be the guy, because he was not that last year. It was quarterback competition. I think it was closer than a lot of people thought it was going to be. But DeQuan Finn came in here with the intent of being the guy. He came in here with the stats that showed he was going to be the guy. And then he wins the battle. And by the way, the bank account that said he was going to be the guy. And then he wins the battle. And it's DeQuan Finn's team, if only for a week and a half, 2 weeks of regular season football. Then it's Sawyer Robertson, and it still took a couple games to get the rust off, and then the rest is history. So now you've got a whole offseason of Sawyer Robertson being the dude, Jake Spavital being the dude, and knowing that you have a potent running attack with Dawson Pendergrass and, of course, Bryson Washington leading the way. You do know that Josh Cameron can be an every down receiver. I think there was still a question of that coming into the season. Those of us who watched intently in 2023 and are entitled to financial compensation for it, we saw that there were some bright spots for this Josh Cameron kid, that he could be more than just like a third down slot receiver. He is a potent every down outside receiver go-to guy. He's coming back. Ashton Hawkins is coming back. That's a big one for us, guys. And I'll talk more about him in a minute. Michael Trigg coming back. And then there are some guys that, honestly, y'all, I still don't know about. Because by now you're getting combine invites. Like, you've announced your decision to go into the draft. But like, there are still some guys that didn't enter the portal. I didn't hear an official announcement, but I guess are going through the NFL draft process. But also, they participated in the senior day activities, but you never know these days. These guys could play 6-7 years, kind of just thrown around like candy. And those guys being Monterey Baldwin and Hal Presley. Like, we still don't know definitive answers on those guys. And now the roster is what the roster is. For now, right? We talk about the spring portal window, but like, this is where you kind of have to make your decision. And so, I don't know, is Hal Presley coming back to this team? Monterey Baldwin coming back to this team? If so, hey, I'll take them. Like, those are two guys I thought were real positive players for you this year, albeit not racking up entirely the production that you thought they would in their senior years, but definitely valuable guys. Monterey Baldwin was still a big play threat. I mean, Kansas fans think he's the best wide receiver in America after what he did to them. But even if they don't, with Ashton Hawkins coming back, you bring back, again, your top two receivers from last year. You bring back 3 of your top 5 pass catchers from last year when you include Michael Trigg in there in terms of yardage, and 3 of your top 4 in terms of receptions. And it goes beyond that. We know Michael Trigg is just a mismatch nightmare, right? We saw a bunch of that during the season, especially in the latter half. And Ashton Hawkins playing on the outside, even though undersized for an outside guy in terms of like the NFL level and even really the Big 12 level, he's still undersized to be doing that. But he showed production in that role as a wide receiver last year. So if he can be your wide receiver on the outside, Josh Cameron's your guy on the other side, Kobe Prentice is in the slot, and let's just say, for argument's sake, Monterey Baldwin's not on this team next year. He did go through senior day festivities. Then that's going to open up some room. And there's a couple of different ways you can go with this. In fact, I'm looking at two guys that it might open up a ton of targets for, if that is your lineup right there. The two guys are Jaden Porter and Matthew Klopfenstein. I might even throw Micah Gifford in there, but I think Dave Aranda has said he likes the idea of him playing defense. He played a ton of special teams this year, but playing some defense for them. Tall wide receiver from Pflugerville. But definitely it's going to open up some shine, I think, for Jaden Porter and Matthew Klopfenstein. Jaden Porter had some reps last year as a true freshman out of Lorena High. Speed guy, good ball skills. Saw him play a lot in high school. He's playing on the outside, of course, in high school. More of a slot body here in the Big 12. And all of a sudden, he can be your second slot guy outside of Kobe Prentice. And that's certainly something that Jake Spavital can utilize in this offense. And he's someone I think the coaches were really high on just by the way he was getting reps last year. He might have still been able to save a red shirt, but he was someone who was out there for a couple of games. And that tells you, with this relatively new within the last, 3 or 4 years, the 4-game rule for a red shirt. If you're playing 3 or 4 games and still keeping that red shirt, that means that they value you in their long-term future, in your long-term future, in the future of this program. And he certainly got enough snaps and got his name called by Derek Smith in the McLean Stadium, PA, enough that I said, they believe this kid's a part of this. They want him to be up to speed by next year is usually what that tells me. And the other guy's Matthew Klopfenstein. And stick with me here because you're saying, Cam, Matthew Klopfenstein is a tight end. Michael Trigg is your tight end. What are you talking about? Yeah, but you guys watch Michael Trigg play. That dude is a monster no matter where you put him on the field. Like, would it stun you if Michael Trigg is playing some slot receiver at some point this year? Wouldn't stun me in the least. Or a 2 tight end set, because Klopfenstein's got some athleticism too. A 2 tight end set, and then you're like, there's so many different route combinations, route concepts that you can have with Michael Trigg if he's lining up at tight end or in the slot, or dare I say, even the backfield. There's a ton of different ways you can use this kid. That's the benefit of having an uber athletic, super tall, tight end. I want to say wide receiver because he looks like a wide receiver. There are so many different ways that Jake Spavital can use Michael Trigg in 2025, and I fully expect them to run the gamut of different ways you can use this guy. And that is going to open up a huge avenue, huge doors for these guys like Jaden Porter and Matthew Klopfenstein, who are just finding their way into the offense and will be big parts of this offense going forward. Guys, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what Jake Spavital does with this personnel that he's going to have for a full offseason here. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How good is this offense going to be? And how about that game last night? We're going to go over this Baylor-Houston game and all that it entailed coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Bears come up just a bit short against Houston in Houston Monday night. Now, they lose by 11. It was like 22 with like 3 or 4 minutes left. Houston did not score. I think this is damning. Houston did not score in the last 5 minutes of the game. And, did not hit a field goal the last 4.5 minutes of the game and still won by 11. I don't think many of us were shocked by this going into this game. The only thing that really kind of bummed me out was I said on the show, the evening edition yesterday, I said the only shot I give Baylor in this game is if they go nuclear from 3. And they kind of did. They shot 9 of 15. You needed probably a higher volume to be in this game. And they shot 9 of 15. They shot 60% from 3. And they still lost by double digits. Like, this is not a tough one to break down, guys. I mean, Baylor is just, they're not on the same plane as Houston. They're not on the same level as Houston this year, this sport. Not even close, really. Houston represents what the top of the Big 12 is like. And it's a bit more, there's a bit more parity up at the top than there has been in recent years. Again, Houston, Iowa State, Tech, and Arizona right now. But that's just, like, that's a team that just takes care of its business, man. They don't play with their food. Like, Baylor was in it for, I don't know, a good 20, 25 minutes of the game, but they were never leading. You know, they were always just a little bit behind. And Houston took a team in Baylor that shot 58% from the floor, 60% from 3, and just kept them at arm's length the whole game. They faced a lesser team at home, a team that had a good shooting night, and they still walked out of there and didn't even get it out of second gear, won it by double digits. I do kind of, I push back on people who say that depth is like this huge thing in college basketball. It's certainly nice, and you don't want to be shorthanded, which is what Baylor was for so much of the season. But I think tonight is a night where you see depth playing a factor, because Baylor has 1 bench point in this game. 1. Houston had 24. So it's nice that you can have a guy like Arsenault come off the bench and give you 11 in 22 minutes, or Wilson giving you 9 in 14 minutes. Baylor doesn't have that. In fact, I think the biggest problem with this team, like, without getting into too much of the style or the attitude or whatever, like, the biggest style, if you're just looking at the box scores, the biggest problem, if you're looking at these box scores after every game, there's just too many guys who don't give you anything. There's too many guys who just don't produce anything, that don't give you any kind of benefit in the box score. Jalen Celestine and Jaden Nunn, they combine to give you a point, a single point, 1 point. How can that be? Those guys are both starters most of the year. Celestine comes off the bench tonight, gives you your only bench point. They combine to shoot 0 for 7 and give you a single doggone point. You know, Jeremy Roach takes 3 shots in 24 minutes. 2 assists, 6 points, 4 fouls. Like, what's that giving you, man? Nunn and Celestine never give you anything, ever. Like, and you see a night like tonight where Rob Wright is just he's not great. You know, I wouldn't say he was terrible, but he's 2 for 7 from the floor. Wasn't anything spectacular, 3 assists. And you have no shot. No shot. I thought you got a good game out of Langston Love again. Not just the garbage time stuff. He hit a couple threes when the game was already decided, but, like, I thought he played solid the whole game. And he looks like a guy who's kind of working his way back in, but definitely doesn't look fish out of water. Norchad ends up getting 19, and which is significantly better than Roberts, by the way. Roberts only had 10 and 3. It looked like the eye test that Roberts had a pretty good game against him. And in some ways he does. You know, he doesn't fill it up, right? 10 and 3. Like, I would be killing him if I was Parker Ainsworth doing the Houston post-game reaction. But Omier only pulls down 5 rebounds. And so I thought he had some good post moves last night. 8 and 9 from the floor. I'm taking that most nights. I just need him more involved on the glass there. And I think if you're Kelvin Sampson, you're telling Juwan Roberts, you did your job. You only got 3, but you really you hold Norchad to 5. Like, they can't win if Norchad's not in double-digit rebounds, and that's been the case all year. That's kind of another simple math thing. Baylor needs a lot of things to go right in the box score to win the game. good teams need a couple of things to go right and for the game to flow in their style. Baylor needs a lot of things to go right. You need Norchad Omier to have a double-double, preferably like a 16-12 double-double. You need VJ Edgecombe to have about 20 plus. You need Jeremy Roach to hit a couple threes. You need Rob Wright to have 14 to 16 points. Like, you need all of those things to go well. You need Jalen Celestine to get involved on the glass. And on a night like tonight, or last night, you don't get that. You don't get that. VJ Edgecombe's your leading rebounder with 6. I don't think the small ball lineup was the thing that actually killed them in this game. I think Houston's better, and you are going to need to play small ball the rest of the year. Like, that's not an option. That's not like, oh, do we need to? Can we do a man-to-man, or should we stick to a zone? Like, no. You have to play small ball the rest of the year. And yeah, I don't think there's any brilliant analysis that needs to be had here. Not that I can give you brilliant analysis, as you well know. But it's just disappointing. You knew a lot needed to go right in the game last night, and they didn't do it. And maybe you can sneak one against them at home in a couple weeks in that 9:00 tip-off. On what's that, I guess the 8th of March, which I think is the last regular season game. You can maybe sneak one past them there, but you're not as good a team as Houston. You need to not let this linger. You need to regroup, because you've got a couple over the next few games that are there for the taking. West Virginia is always a bit of a tricky one, and they've stubbed some toes this year. You got Arizona, which is a good team, but you got them at home. And then the next one is at Cincinnati, which can also be tricky. They're not a very good team. You already beat them, but they get usually a good crowd. They love playing at home. It really plays to their style. So you got to take care of business these next couple games. You don't get hung up on losing to Houston or losing to the Iowa States of the world, the Texas Techs. You got to move forward, man, the way you did after that loss to Tech last week. But yeah, I don't think this one was really stunning too many of us last night. But again, not to keep bitching down your throat here on a Tuesday morning, but like, this is a tough limbo to be in, man. The ceiling of this team isn't very high. They're probably going to make the tournament, right? But you're just going to be on that 8-9 line for the next month. Unless you make some run in the Big 12 tournament. We know how the Baylor's prestigious history at the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. We're just going to be living in this limbo. You're like the team, you're like the Bulls, man. You're playing for the play-in every year and hoping something goes right. That's what this year is like for Baylor. So anyway, let me know what you guys thought about the game. Drop that down in the comments below. How great the Big 12 is. And how you feel about this Baylor football offense going into 2025. Please let me know down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Find us wherever you find your podcast. It's a huge help. You guys are the best fans ever. You make this show so much fun. So be sure to like, subscribe, help out the channel, all that good stuff. 3/4 of you are not subscribed. That really, really helps. And we will be back tomorrow. We will see you then on Locked On Baylor.